Listen carefully. What I'm about to give you isn't comfort, it's clarity. And clarity is lethal to narcissists. Most people don't lose to narcissists because they're weak. They lose because they never realize a game is being played on them. A narcissist doesn't confront you openly. They don't need to. They operate through confusion, distortion, and psychological pressure so subtle that you begin doubting your own memory, your instincts, even your sense of reality. You question what you felt, you second-guess what you saw, and slowly, without noticing, you hand them control. Machiavelli understood this long before modern psychology tried to soften it. Real power is not force, it is perception. Whoever controls how reality is interpreted controls the outcome. On Machiavellian dark psychology, we don't teach you to be nice, agreeable, or emotionally available. We teach you how to become untouchable. Today is not about becoming cruel, it's about becoming immune. Because once you understand these mind games, they lose their effect permanently. The illusion collapses, the control evaporates. Anchor this now. Comment, "I see the game." Not for the algorithm, for yourself. Because the moment you truly see the game, you stop reacting, you stop explaining, you stop defending, and that is the moment power quietly returns to you. The first mind game narcissists master is not shouting, it's not anger, it's rewriting reality. Gaslighting is the quiet art of making you doubt your own perception while they appear calm, reasonable, even concerned. They don't deny aggressively, they deny casually. They look you in the eye and tell you that what you remember didn't happen the way you think it did. Not once, repeatedly. And over time, repetition replaces truth. You start questioning your memory before they even speak. That's the goal. A narcissist understands something most people never learn. The mind seeks stability more than truth. When two versions of reality collide, yours and theirs, the average person chooses the one that creates less internal conflict. And the narcissist exploits that instinct. They introduce small contradictions first, minor denials. "You're too sensitive." "That's not what I meant." "You're imagining things." Nothing dramatic, nothing provable, just enough to plant doubt. Then they let you do the work. You begin replaying conversations in your head. You search for the exact wording. You analyze tone, timing, intention. Meanwhile, they move on unbothered, because confusion is not a side effect, it's the strategy. Machiavelli warned that the most effective deception is the one that forces the victim to participate in their own manipulation. Gaslighting works because it turns your intelligence against you. The smarter you are, the harder you try to make sense of something that was designed to make no sense. Over time, this does something dangerous. You stop trusting your instincts. You stop asserting boundaries confidently. You start asking for permission to feel what you feel. And once that happens, the narcissist no longer needs to control the situation. They control you. Not through dominance, but through doubt. A doubting mind is a compliant mind. The cold truth is this: gaslighting only works on people who keep trying to be understood. Narcissists rely on your need for clarity, fairness, and resolution. They know you want alignment. They know you want peace. So they weaponize ambiguity. They keep everything just unclear enough that you stay engaged, explaining, justifying, defending. That's where they want you. Emotionally invested, mentally unstable, and constantly seeking validation they never intend to give. The moment gaslighting loses power is the moment you stop arguing with altered reality. You don't correct, you don't convince, you don't chase agreement. You observe, you document internally, you trust patterns over words. Machiavelli's lesson here is ruthless but effective. When truth is under attack, silence becomes a shield. You don't need them to admit anything. You only need to see clearly. Gaslighting collapses when you stop participating, when you no longer need them to confirm what you already know, when your certainty becomes internal instead of negotiated. That's when their calm mask slips. Because a narcissist cannot control someone who no longer doubts themselves, that is the first crack in their power. They also play a quieter game, one that looks like generosity but feels like obligation. It's called conditional approval. They give praise, attention, warmth, or support, but only when it serves their position. The moment you step out of line, the reward disappears. Silence replaces affection. Distance replaces closeness. And your nervous system learns a dangerous lesson. Compliance equals safety. You begin adjusting your behavior not based on principle, but based on what keeps the peace. This is not love, it's training. A narcissist understands reinforcement better than most psychologists. They know that inconsistent reward is stronger than constant reward. When approval is unpredictable, you work harder for it. You replay interactions, you self-correct. You abandon parts of yourself without realizing it. Slowly, you become easier to shape. Machiavelli would call this the illusion of favor, the appearance of generosity used to secure loyalty without commitment. The narcissist never promises stability. They promise moments, and moments are enough to keep you hooked. Over time, you confuse their approval with your worth. When they withdraw, you assume you failed. You don't question their standards, you question yourself. That's the trap. A man who ties his identity to another person's approval becomes manageable. He negotiates his dignity. He trades silence for peace, strength for acceptance, and the narcissist watches, learning exactly how little they need to give to get everything they want. The antidote is cold and uncomfortable but effective. You stop measuring yourself through their reactions. You detach your value from their mood. You no longer chase consistency from someone who benefits from chaos. Approval loses its leverage the moment it is no longer needed. When praise doesn't inflate you and withdrawal doesn't destabilize you, the game breaks. Narcissists rely on emotional hunger. Take that away, and they are left negotiating with someone who cannot be starved. Power returns the moment your standards stop moving. They escalate when control begins to slip. Not with rage at first, but with guilt. This is the third game, and it's one of the most effective. They recast themselves as the victim, and you as the aggressor. Your boundaries become cruelty. Your silence becomes abandonment. Your independence becomes betrayal. Suddenly, the conversation is no longer about what they did. It's about how your response made them feel. This reversal is intentional. Machiavelli warned that the easiest way to disarm someone is to make them defend their morality instead of their position. A narcissist knows most people would rather feel wrong than feel cruel, so they exploit your conscience. They exaggerate their pain. They dramatize their suffering. They remind you of everything they've done for you, carefully edited, selectively remembered. And if you resist, they accuse you of being cold, ungrateful, or heartless. The trap is simple. If you keep your boundary, you feel like the villain. If you drop it, they regain access. Either way, they benefit, unless you see the mechanism. This game works because it bypasses logic and goes straight for identity. You don't want to be the kind of person who hurts others. They know that. So they push you into a false choice, your self-respect or your self-image. The untrained mind sacrifices self-respect first. It apologizes for things that were necessary. It explains boundaries as if they need permission, and every explanation becomes another opening. Machiavellian strategy here is restraint. You don't argue with manufactured guilt. You don't defend yourself against emotional theater. You recognize that responsibility ends where manipulation begins. Guilt that appears only when you assert yourself is not moral. It's tactical. The narcissist isn't wounded by your action. They're threatened by your autonomy. The moment you stop responding to guilt with justification, the script collapses. You acknowledge without surrendering. You remain calm without conceding. You let discomfort exist without rushing to resolve it. This unsettles them because guilt loses power when it no longer produces obedience. A narcissist can control anger. They can manage charm, but they cannot operate against someone who refuses emotional blackmail. When guilt stops working, they are forced to reveal what was always underneath. A need for control disguised as pain. And once you see that clearly, you don't carry their emotions anymore. You let them carry their own. They also rely on a more aggressive tactic once subtle control fails: provocation. This is the fourth game. They poke, interrupt, disrespect, and apply pressure until you react. Not because they enjoy chaos, but because reaction gives them leverage. The moment you raise your voice, explain yourself emotionally, or lose composure, the frame shifts. Now you're unstable. Now you're overreacting. And everything that led to that moment disappears. Machiavelli understood this well. Whoever controls the frame controls the judgment. A narcissist doesn't need to win the argument. They only need you to lose your calm. They understand that emotional reactions make people predictable. So they drip irritation slowly, sarcasm, dismissal, subtle insults, calculated disrespect, just enough to test your thresholds. If you react, they escalate. If you stay quiet, they push harder. The goal is not resolution. The goal is exposure. They want to see where your emotional armor is thin. Once you react, they retreat. They become composed, reasonable, almost disappointed. They'll say things like, "Why are you getting so worked up?" or "I was just joking." This reversal is intentional. It places you on trial for your response instead of their behavior. And if you're not trained, you fall for it. You apologize for reacting instead of questioning why you were provoked. This is where discipline separates the controlled from the untouchable. You don't suppress emotion. You delay it. You refuse to give immediate feedback. You observe the pattern instead of the moment. Provocation loses power when it no longer produces spectacle. Silence, in this context, is not weakness. It's denial of supply. Narcissists feed on reaction. Take that away, and they grow restless. Machiavelli would call this mastery of tempo. You decide when engagement happens. You decide what deserves a response. You don't explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. You don't perform emotion for someone looking to exploit it. You let their tactics exhaust themselves against your stillness. Eventually, something revealing happens. When provocation stops working, the narcissist becomes impatient. The mask cracks. The behavior becomes more obvious, and that clarity is valuable. Because the person who cannot provoke you cannot control you. Control requires access, and calm denies access completely. They save the most dangerous game for last, not because it's loud, but because it's invisible. This is the fifth mind game, and it's the one that keeps people trapped long after they think they're free. It's called future faking, the promise of a better version of them that never arrives, the illusion of change always just around the corner, a different tone, a softer version, a more respectful tomorrow. Narcissists understand that people will tolerate almost anything if they believe relief is coming. So they don't change behavior, they change timelines. They hint at growth without committing to it. They acknowledge mistakes without correcting them. They say the right words at the right moments, especially when you're pulling away. "I'm working on myself. Things will be different now. Just give me time." These phrases are not meant to heal. They're meant to pause consequences. Machiavelli would recognize this instantly. Hope is one of the most effective tools of control because it keeps resistance passive. You don't leave, you wait, you don't confront, you anticipate, and anticipation is a leash. Future faking works because it targets your imagination, not your logic. You don't respond to what is, you respond to what could be. You start judging the relationship not by present reality, but by potential. And potential is infinite, which means the game never has to end. They can always promise a version of themselves that excuses the current one. They borrow credibility from a future they never intend to reach. Over time, this creates emotional paralysis. You stop trusting the present, but you don't act on it. You stay suspended between dissatisfaction and hope. You feel something is wrong, but you're constantly reminded of what might be right later. That delay weakens decision-making. It softens resolve. It keeps you negotiating with time instead of reality. And while you wait, they benefit. Access remains open, accountability stays deferred, and control continues uninterrupted. Here's the hard truth most people avoid. Patterns are more honest than promises. Narcissists rely on your willingness to override evidence with optimism. They know that if they can keep you focused on the future, you won't fully assess the present. That's why the same cycles repeat. Apology, hope, temporary improvement, regression, then another promise. Each loop drains more energy than the last, and by the time you realize nothing is changing, you're exhausted. Machiavellian strategy here is brutal but freeing. You collapse time. You stop asking where things are going and start observing where they are. You judge behavior without buffering it with intention. You remove the benefit of the doubt and replace it with the benefit of observation. You don't punish. You don't argue. You simply stop investing in narratives unsupported by action. Hope loses power when it's no longer fed. When future faking stops working, narcissists panic quietly. They sense that their leverage is gone. The fantasy no longer holds you, and without the future to hide behind, they are exposed to the present. That's when clarity arrives, not as emotion, but as certainty. You don't feel angry, you feel finished. And that state is dangerous to anyone who survives on control. If you've made it this far, understand this. Most people never do. They get distracted, they get uncomfortable, they leave before the final pattern is revealed, but you stayed. And because you stayed, there is one more section waiting for you. One final mind game, not as information, but as a gift. A consolidation of everything you've learned. A way to lock these insights into instinct, so you don't just understand the games, you outgrow them. You are no longer learning how narcissists operate, you are learning how they lose power over you. What comes last is not a trick, it's the metagame, the one narcissists never talk about because it ends everything for them at once. It's the game of identity erosion, and it's the reason all the other games work. Narcissists don't just want control over situations. They want control over who you think you are. Gaslighting weakens your trust in perception. Conditional approval weakens your sense of worth. Guilt weakens your boundaries. Provocation weakens your composure. Future faking weakens your resolve. But identity erosion is the quiet accumulation of all of it. It's when you no longer need to be actively manipulated because you begin self-editing on their behalf. This is the stage where people say things like, "That's just how they are," or "Maybe I expect too much," or "I know they mean well." Notice what's happening. Your standards have shifted, not because reality changed, but because adapting felt easier than resisting. Machiavelli warned that the most complete form of domination is when resistance disappears without force. Identity erosion is domination without noise. You still function, you still perform, but the sharper parts of you, the instincts, the edge, the clarity, have been dulled. Narcissists accelerate this by reframing your strengths as flaws. Your discernment becomes overthinking. Your independence becomes coldness. Your boundaries become selfishness. Your calm becomes emotional distance. Slowly, you are trained to associate self-respect with guilt. The result is internal conflict. You hesitate before speaking. You rehearse responses. You dilute truth to avoid friction. And every time you do, a small part of your identity steps back. This is why people stay longer than logic would suggest. They're not trapped by love. They're trapped by an altered self-concept. Leaving doesn't just mean losing the narcissist. It means confronting how much of yourself you compromised. That's painful. So the mind rationalizes, it minimizes, it delays. And the narcissist never has to stop you. You stop yourself. Here is the reversal narcissists never anticipate. Identity erosion can be reversed faster than it was created. Not through confrontation, not through closure, through re-anchoring. You stop asking who you were in relation to them. You start asking who you are when no one is shaping your reactions. You pay attention to how your body responds in silence. You notice how your mind feels when you're not explaining yourself. There is relief there. That relief is information. Machiavellian discipline at this stage is surgical. You don't announce change. You don't negotiate transformation. You quietly restore internal authority. You make small, private decisions that reassert self-trust. You act on observations instead of emotions. You stop volunteering context. You let others misinterpret you without correction. Identity solidifies when it is no longer defended. This is the point where narcissists feel something they don't understand. The atmosphere changes. The old tactics don't land the same way. Gaslighting feels ineffective. Guilt feels hollow. Provocation feels awkward. Promises feel weightless. They may try to escalate, or charm, or withdraw, but none of it reaches you the same way, because the core shift has already happened. You're no longer asking, how do I make this work? You're asking, does this align with who I am? And that question is fatal to manipulation. There is a reason Machiavelli emphasized self-command above all else. He understood that power over others is unstable, but power over self compounds. When your identity is anchored internally, external pressure loses leverage. You don't need to be understood to be certain. You don't need validation to be decisive. You don't need closure to move on. And that combination, certainty without explanation, is unnerving to those who rely on psychological access. If you've made it this far, you've already done something most people don't. You didn't consume this for entertainment. You stayed through discomfort, through recognition, through the moments where something clicked and you realized this wasn't just theory, it was personal. That matters, because awareness without integration fades, but awareness followed by discipline becomes instinct. There is one more section waiting for you. One final mind game section, given deliberately as a gift. Not to expose narcissists further, but to show you how to operate in a way that makes these games irrelevant in your life going forward. A section about presence, restraint, and strategic withdrawal, about how to move in the world without broadcasting, without explaining, without being pulled into psychological debt. You didn't just learn how the game is played, you learned how to leave the board entirely. You've made it to the end, and that matters more than you think. Most people stop the moment truth becomes uncomfortable. They turn away when patterns start to feel familiar. You didn't. You stayed. And staying is proof of something important. You're no longer here to be entertained, distracted, or emotionally manipulated. You're here to understand, to sharpen perception, to move with intention instead of impulse. Everything you've heard wasn't designed to make you angry or paranoid. It was designed to make you clear. Clear people are dangerous to manipulation because they don't argue with reality. They observe it. They don't chase control. They withdraw access. And once you reach that point, the games you once feared simply stop working. From this point forward, your advantage isn't aggression. It's restraint. You won't need to expose narcissists, confront them, or explain yourself. You'll recognize patterns early. You'll feel the shift before damage is done. And most importantly, you'll trust that instinct without outsourcing it to anyone else. That's what being untouchable actually looks like. Quiet, grounded, unavailable to chaos. If this video helped you see something more clearly about yourself, about others, about the games people play, then take a second to like it. It tells this platform to push clarity instead of noise. If you've reached this point and felt something click, leave a comment with what stood out to you the most. Not for validation, but to anchor the insight. And if you want more content like this, cold psychology, power dynamics, and mental frameworks that actually work in the real world, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. New insights are coming, and the ones who benefit most are always the ones who stay ahead of the pattern. Stay sharp, stay disciplined, and remember, once you see the game, you don't need to play it anymore.